So today we are finishing up our series, Do Not Disturb, where we have been talking about technology and screens and social media. And here's what we've been trying to answer. There's a question we've been wrestling with this entire series, this entire month. Here's the question. How is all of our screen time affecting us emotionally, relationally, mentally, and spiritually? How is it affecting us? What is it doing? Is it helping us? Is it hurting us? What damage is it doing? What benefits does it have? And that's what we've been talking about throughout this entire series. Some of you, this might be your first time, and you're hearing the last part of it, but some of you have been here for the whole time, and so that's what we've been discussing. And I don't know how you've been this month, but for me, it's been an interesting month for a couple reasons. I started noticing as I was preparing sermons on what we should do with our screens and how much TV we should watch and what we should do with our phones and something. As I'm preparing that, I found quickly, I started to notice how quickly I would go to my phone or my screen and how much I struggled with all this stuff. I noticed the times that I would just instinctively pull out my phone when I felt just a second of boredom. All I needed was a second of boredom and my phone was out. I noticed it. I noticed the times that I pulled my phone out when my kids were playing in the room. I noticed it. I was like, oh, I'm easily doing that. I noticed the times that I wanted to reach for my phone when I was in a room with all my friends, which didn't make sense. I was at a wedding last week. All of my close friends were there, and there was times where we were getting ready for the wedding. We're all just kind of sitting, hanging out, and we're all talking, and I just started grabbing my phone and just scrolling on Facebook, and all my friends are sitting with me. I don't know what it was, but it just naturally, I noticed it. I noticed the times that I would prepare. I would put the kids to bed. I was like, all right, I'm gonna. My plan is I'm gonna go read my Bible after this, and then I'll watch some TV and before I go to sleep. And then I sit down. I was like, well, I'm gonna watch just one quick YouTube video, and then before you know it, hours have gone by, and I haven't done the thing I wanted to do because I was too busy watching. I noticed it. I noticed the nights that I spent on my laptop instead of reading the books that I want to read. And then here's what else I noticed, and I'm going to thank some of you for that. You all noticed all the times I was on my phone too. Because here's what kept happening this whole month. I would be here early. We started setting up around 7:38, and I would be here early, and then when we set up, I would be on my phone looking at something or texting somebody. And multiple times I had people say, oh, what are you doing? You prepping for your sermon? I heard that a lot. And then one time I was actually at the store, and someone came up to me and said, oh, what? I was looking at my phone. I don't know why, but I was looking at it, and someone said, oh, you're looking at your screen, huh? You doing sermon prep? And here's what I say to you, if you ever said those comments to me, with all the love in my heart, shut up, okay? I'm a work in progress. Jeez. But here's my hope for you throughout this series. My hope is that, as you've been listening, that you've just adjusted a little bit. My hope wasn't that all these sudden something radically changed in you when it comes to your social media. I wasn't planning on anyone going to flip phones because our phones are dangerous and getting rid of all of our social medias. But maybe we just adjusted a little bit. A little less time on our screens, a little more intentional about what we do with our screens. That's my hope for this, because the answer has never been to get rid of all of our tech. It's not even possible today. That's never been the answer. And technology is not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a good thing either, but it's not a bad thing. Technology is simply a tool. And when you use the tool appropriately, it is very beneficial. But if you use the tool inappropriately, not only will it not serve its purpose, but it can harm you. Think of it this way. A hammer, right? That's a tool. And you want to nail something in, a hammer is the best tool for that. But if you need to cut something and you try to use a hammer instead, first off, it's not going to work very well, and you might hurt yourself. That's what technology is. It is a tool that we need to use appropriately. So throughout this series, we've been talking a lot about the dangers of this tool of technology and how it can hurt you spiritually and how it can hurt your mental health, how it can hurt your relationships. And nothing we have said, my guess is, nothing we've said has been controversial to you. Everything we've said, my guess is like, yeah, I figured being on social media too much is not a good thing. I figured that. I figured that this big change in technology that we've seen over the past 10, 15, 20 years has some disadvantages. Yeah, that's fine. I get that. And what I've also found, and maybe you noticed this, but this isn't like a Christian view that technology can be dangerous. Watch any movie or any television show about technology, and it's the end of the world because of it. We could talk about Terminator, The Matrix, Avatar, WALL-E, Black Mirror, like I can name you shows and movies that show that technology can be very dangerous. This is not a Christian worldview. This is an everyone worldview. Because it absolutely can be dangerous. And that's what we've talked about so far. But it doesn't always have to be. It doesn't always have to be a negative. It can be used for good things because I believe that God created technology. God created us to be able to create technology. And that God has always used technology to spread the message of the gospel. Technologies can be used to help us grow closer to God. So today, the question I want to wrestle with as we close out this series and then we stop talking about technology stuff is this. How can we be disciples in a digital age? How can we be disciples in a digital age? When I say the word disciple, what do I mean by that? Here's what I don't mean. When I say disciple, I don't mean that you come to church. Like, I think as a disciple you should come to church, but just because you come doesn't mean you're a disciple. I don't mean that someone who just checks off the Christian box in a survey. That's not what I mean when I say the word disciple. I don't mean someone who believes in God as an insurance policy just in case there is an afterlife. I'm just going to say I believe in this God so that way I can trick myself into getting into heaven even though the rest of my life's not going to follow it at all. That's not what I mean when I say the word disciple. None of those things make you a disciple. A disciple is a lifelong learner of Jesus. A disciple is someone who gives every aspect of their life over to Christ. Not just the easy ones. Every aspect, my mental health, my what I do with my money, what I do with my time, my strengths, my gifts, every aspect I'm giving over. That's what a disciple is. A disciple is someone who trusts Christ as their Savior and their Lord. So how can we be disciples in a digital age? How can we actually do that? How can we be disciples in this day and age? Let's go back to our theme verse. We've read this verse each week. This will be the last time you hear it. And my hope is at this point you've started to kind of memorize it a little bit. Here's what it says, Romans chapter 12, 1 through 2. Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Since we've read this a lot, I found the Message translation for this. And if you don't know much about the Message translation, this is basically a paraphrase of the Bible. Okay? It's not the most biblically accurate, but a lot of times it is worded in a way that makes us think differently. So let me read it to you in the Message translation, and let's see what we hear from this. So here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, your swiping, your texting life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You will be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you, develops well-formed maturity in you. When Paul wrote this letter, he was writing to a first-generation Christ follower. This is someone who did not grow up with the Jewish tradition as their background and as their heritage. Another way we can say it is, these are people that did not grow up in a Christian home, which maybe is some of our stories. Maybe for some of us, we did not grow up in a Christian home. Maybe for some of us, we grew up in a Christian home as in we went to church on Easter and Christmas Eve, and that's when we went. That was our Christian home. Or maybe you did grow up in a home that went to church on Sundays, but you didn't live any of it out the rest of the week, so it's just a Sunday thing, and then the rest of the week didn't feel like a Christian family. If that's you, that's who Paul's talking to here. And Paul is really trying to tell us what is at the heart of these two verses is an encouragement. It's an encouragement to pay attention. Pay attention to what is influencing us. Pay attention to what we are allowing in us, because we can easily be conformed to what is going on around us. But if we pay attention, then we can be transformed. Because here's what I believe you all know, and here's what I've learned. Your thoughts affect your life. They affect your life. Have you ever heard this statement, you are what you eat? As a kid, I heard that statement a lot, right? You are what you eat. And here's what that really means. Here's what it's trying to say. If you take things that are unhealthy food, let's say like pizza and wings and desserts and everything that's good in this world, okay? Take that stuff. And you eat only that, you will be unhealthy. You won't feel that great. But if you eat like healthy foods like veggies and fruit and fish and the stuff that no one wants to eat, if you eat that stuff, then you will feel better. And we know this is true. I can destroy pizza. I can destroy wings, and I'm gross when I eat wings. If you ever eaten wings with me, I get all the grimace, the cartilage. I get it all off. That bone is clean. Okay, I destroy it. You don't want to be remember Gallagher with the watermelon? You need like an apron when you're around me, okay? Because it just goes everywhere. But here's what will happen: I will eat all this unhealthy food that tastes so good, and then I will feel terrible the rest of the day. You are what you eat. That's where that saying comes from. The same thing goes with your thoughts. Your thoughts, what you think, and how you think determines the life that you will live. It determines what you value most, what you will seek after, what you will go after. Your thoughts are important. And you might hear that and go, but here's the thing. I have bad thoughts pop in my head all the time. I can't even control them. They just pop up and all of a sudden they're there. So if my thoughts are that important, what do I do with all these bad thoughts? And maybe I should say it this way. You are always moving towards your strongest thought. Whatever that strongest thought is, that's the way your life is going to move. If your strongest thought is all about getting new stuff, about having security, making a lot of money, you will do whatever it takes to make money, because that's your strongest thought. If your strongest thought is all about your happiness, making sure that you are happy above everything else, if that's your strongest thought, you will do whatever it takes to make yourself happy, no matter what long effect it has in your life and no matter how it affects everyone around you, because that's your strongest thought. And on the flip side, if your strongest thought is about becoming the person God created you to be so you can show the message of His love and the gospel to everybody, you'll work to achieve that. So if this is true, that your thoughts affect your life, then this is important. We have to understand it. But if that's true, then what influences your thoughts? We would say, and we've been saying this entire series, your inputs influence your thoughts. The inputs that you give it will affect your thoughts. I have seen this work in my life in very good ways and very bad ways. I've had stretches where I've watched videos of like proper ways to work out and like how to eat healthy and like inspirational Instagram places where it's like people are like trying to be very healthy and it'll make me healthier. Then I'll watch videos of Hot Ones Challenge where they eat the spicy wings to do an interview or One Bite Pizza reviews or Man vs. Food, and then all of a sudden I want to destroy everything unhealthy. Like, that's all what I want. Whatever you put, the input will affect your thoughts. Whatever input you expose yourself to the most will influence your thoughts. And that is exactly where our tech comes in. Because we are constantly being exposed to inputs, whether they're good or bad. And these inputs are influencing our thoughts, and our thoughts determine the life that we live. That's what happens. So what do we do about it? The best verse, I think, that talks about this, and I repeat this verse to myself all the time, is 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. It says this, "We take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ." We look at our life and we make a decision. This is the way I want to live. So every thought that is not obedient to who God is calling me to be, take captive every thought and make it obedient to God. And by the way, if you want to be a disciple, you have to be intentional about the direction you're going. It doesn't happen accidentally. You have to be intentional about it. That means you have to practice spiritual disciplines. That means you have to come consistently to church on Sundays. And if you miss, you watch the podcast or the sermon back. It means serving. It means being in the right community. If you want to be a disciple, you need to be intentional about it. Just having a belief is not enough. God didn't call us to just have a belief. He called us to follow Him. You have to plan on how you will look more like Christ. And once you know the direction you want to go, once you know the person you want to become, once you know who God is calling you to be, whenever those thoughts come up that are not taking you in the right direction, we take them captive and we make them obedient. Here's the way I always think about it. I think of cattle. There's ranchers that are looking to tag and brand cattle. So they will have to push them in a certain direction so that way they can tag them and brand them and do what they need to do. And I'm not a farmer or a rancher or anything like that, but here's what I know. Cattle do not want to be tagged and they don't want to be branded. So sometimes they will go off and they'll try to run away, and these ranchers will be on a horse and they will take a lasso and they'll rope them and bring them back in there. That's what I think of when I think of take captive every thought. That when a thought goes off the direction we want to go, we take it captive and we bring it back. When one gets out of line, we bring it back where it's supposed to be. But what would happen if all the cattle at one time say, you know what, on the count of 3, we're all just going. We're just running as far as we can. The ranchers are not going to be able to stop all the cattle. They might be able to get some back, but some are going to escape. If we constantly put incorrect inputs into our thoughts, we constantly feed ourselves inputs that are not helping us go in the direction we want to go, you will have too many thoughts to take captive. It will be like a bunch of cattle just scattering. And we're trying to capture them, but there's too many thoughts going. Your inputs influence your thoughts, and your thoughts affect your life. So if you want to have a certain life, you need to make sure that your inputs match the life you want to live, the person God is calling you to be. And that is where our technology comes into play. Because it isn't huge, big decisions that we make occasionally that change our lives. Instead, it's small decisions that we do consistently that change the direction of our life. And one thing we found is that social science is telling us that. Let me read to you some things that social science is telling us. McComb School of Business did a study that found that our cognitive capacity is reduced whenever a phone is within reach. Here's what that means. This sermon is worse because my phone is up here. This sermon is dumber because I'm holding my phone right now. But here's the good news, flip side. Putting your phone in another room actually gives your brain a boost. That's what they're finding in social science. Another study shows that the more you use Facebook, the lower your mental health and life satisfaction. And the less you use Facebook and interact with people face-to-face, it improves. They found when people stay off Facebook a whole week, they felt happier, less lonely, less angry, less worried, and less depressed. And then there's this quote from Randall Brown that scared me, and will probably scare you. Randall Brown studies neuroscience, and he founded Dopamine Labs. And here's the quote. It'll be up on the screen as well. A computer programmer nowadays understands how the brain works. So they know how to write code that will get your brain to do certain things. They know that your mind is stimulated to get a neurological response. So they are trying to get you to come back to the screen as often as possible. What people don't realize is that you are a guinea pig on the screen pushing the buttons and sometimes getting the likes. And this part's pretty crazy. Sometimes we hold back the likes on Instagram and then give it to you in a burst to maximize your dopamine. We have algorithms we use for this. We are doing this to keep you on there. That should scare us. You should be aware of that. We know the risk and danger of technology, but if you look at the history of Christianity, the history of the church, I've found that God has always used technology to preach the message of hope to the world. I mean, here's the earliest I could find in the Bible about technology. It's in Psalms 81, verse 12. It says this, "So I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own devices." See if anyone caught it. Obviously, it's not talking about devices, okay? Chill out, everybody. See if anyone was catching it. I should just roll through it, and some people are like, they talk about devices in Psalms? Anyways, so we have seen technology from very early on, and here's some of the earliest. I could talk about the Tower of Babel. I can talk about a lot of things in the Old Testament, but one of the earliest things I noticed and I found in Scripture, the Old Testament and the New Testament, in between the last book of the Old Testament and the first book of the New Testament, there are 300 years of silence. 300 years of God not doing anything, it seems like, of God not speaking. They call this the intertestamental period. There's 300 years where God seems to be doing nothing. And a lot of people could look at that and be like, God, were you just asleep? Like, what was taking so long? But if you look back at the history of the world and what happened in that 300-year time period, an invention happened. And this invention was very crucial and important to the message of the Messiah, Jesus coming. The invention was one of the very first highways. Rome built this highway called the Appian Way. It ran 132 miles from Rome to Campania. And because of this invention, people were able to travel more frequently. They were able to travel more freely back and forth. So when a census comes out and asks everyone to go back to their hometowns, this guy named Joseph, who's engaged to this girl named Mary, who is pregnant with a baby, have to go back to Bethlehem using one of these inventions of the highway. They go back to Bethlehem, and that's where Jesus is born, which fulfilled the prophecy that was talked about in the Old Testament. God used this time period to have an invention that fulfilled the prophecy that he had been saying for a while. Then we fast forward to 3 John, and here's what John says about a piece of technology that was important then. I have much to write you, but I do not want to do so with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. There were things that John wanted to discuss in person, which, by the way, little side note, it's always better to do that. If you're in a fight with someone, don't text it. Don't email it. Don't message. Talk to them face to face. It's always better, okay? That's a little side note. But he wanted to talk face to face, but he said, I got to use the invention because I got to tell you some things right now that are super important. I'm going to use the invention I have today, and it's simply a scroll, papyrus, and ink. Back then, only the religious elite would use scrolls and papyrus and ink because it was expensive. So what would happen is people would hire other people to tell their life story, and they would tell the story, and they would always make sure it sounded a little better, so all the rich people had story written out. But for some reason, all these people decided to write the story, which was an expensive process, of this Jewish carpenter who wasn't around anymore. Why? Why would they do that? I would argue because they saw this guy say, I'm going to die and come back to life 3 days later to save you, and they saw him do it, so they said, someone's got to write this story. Papyrus and ink, one of the earliest inventions. We keep fast forward thousands of years, and there's this new invention in Germany. The invention is called the printing press. This brand new creation that completely and dramatically improved printing methods. Before then, again, the elite had books. The elite had things written out, and this included the church. And the church had all the Bibles in different languages that most people could not understand, had all the Bibles, and no one else could access. So when you don't have access to the book that's telling you how to live, you need to listen to the people who do. The problem was the people who had access to it would abuse that power and say, you know what, this Bible that you don't have is saying you need to buy this salvation. That with a little bit of tithe and that kind of stuff, then all of a sudden you'll get to heaven. But then the printing press comes up, and we can talk about the Protestant Reformation happened right around that time. Everyone eventually was able to get their own Bible, and the message of this hope spread quickly, the printing press. Then we keep fast forwarding, and the radio showed up. The very first radio station was found in Pittsburgh in January of 1921. And every Sunday evening in 1921, they would broadcast services from the Calvary Episcopal Church Choir, very early on. In the summer of 1922, evangelist Paul Rader was the first person to preach a sermon over the radio. From the very early parts of the radio, the message of Jesus was being preached, and it only increased from there. Churches, pastors, and evangelists used this technology of the radio to share the message of the gospel, not only to America, but all over the world. Then, eventually, we get television. 1952, Rex Humbard became the first pastor to have a weekly televised church service. His program spanned the globe, reaching 695 stations in 91 different languages. In 1957, Oral Roberts' broadcast reached 90% of the possible television audience. God has always used technology to advance it. Now you fast forward to today, and we have access to the message of the gospel in many different ways, through podcasts, through YouTubes, through streaming services, through things like the show The Chosen, which we talked about in Family Service, which if you have not watched, I highly recommend you watch it. It's completely free, one of the best streaming shows I've ever seen about Jesus and the gospel. We see all that, and then the biggest advancement we've seen recently has been the YouVersion Bible app. Many of you may have this on your phone. Created by Life Church, the YouVersion Bible app is the most downloaded, shared, worldwide Bible app ever created. Here's their annual report in 2020 said that over 500 million people have downloaded the Bible to their phone since its inception in 2008. Users have either read or listened to 64 billion chapters of the Bible in 2021 alone. 2,600 Bible versions are out there on the YouVersion Bible app in 1,760 different languages. Because of the new technology, because of this app, now places that have never seen a Bible now have access to Bible in their language. God has always used technology to advance his message. Technology has always been used for that. and even on a local level. Because here at Impact, we found the new front door to this church is not that front door. The new front door is our social media and our live stream, which conveniently is not working today. But every time a new person comes to Impact, I'll ask them, how'd you hear about us? And they'll tell us how, and they always say, well, yeah, I listened to a couple sermons before I showed up. So before they walk in, they know whether they like my preaching style or not, and I assume that every single person that's ever watched our live stream loves the preaching, and that's why they come. Just kidding. But they know kind of the feel before they walk in. That's how things work. We only started live stream because of this pandemic that happened, because we had to get access to church. And now God has been able to use technology to help people to kind of feel out, hey, is this church I want to go to? Do I want to try this out? Let me check this out before I go in there, because it's very hard to go to a new church sometimes. If you've been in church culture long enough, you kind of forget that, but it's intimidating to show up to a place for the first time that you don't know anybody. So this is a chance for people to figure that out, live stream and social media. So today, as we close, I want to go back to our question. How can we be disciples in a digital age? Because we understand that our inputs influence our thoughts, and our thoughts affect our life. So how can we use technology as a tool to become a better disciple in a digital age? And 2 weeks ago, I gave you very practical things that you can start doing to help make sure that you're not on your phones, your tech too much. Today, I'm going to give you very practical things that you can start doing in your life right now to help you with your mental health, to help you with your spirituality, with your faith, by using technology. Here's some things that you can do, and I recommend at least one of these things you start doing. First one, keep spiritual disciplines consistent. If you have the YouVersion Bible app, you can pull it up and they have reading plans on there. And I'm a competitive guy, so what happens for me is they give you streaks. So if I'm reading my Bible consistently, it will give me streaks, and I'll know I've read 7 days in a row, 8 days in a row, whatever. And there'll be days where I don't really feel like reading, but I know I have a streak going. So I'm like, well, I want to keep my streak going, so I guess I'll read. And the times where I don't want to, I still find myself doing it because of an app. An app has helped me to do that. Reading plans. It helps with prayer. I have apps that help me just to be quiet and to meditate and be silent, because I have a lot of trouble doing that. So I'll put the app on, I'll put how much time I have, and it'll have some music play. It'll help me to get to the point where I can just be still and silent. If you're having trouble with your spiritual disciplines, if you want to keep them consistent, then your apps and your stuff can help you. If you want to be a person that tithes, you can do that. You can set it up automatically. Because I know for me, if I have to write a check, I forget all the time. Or when I need to write the check, I'm like, oh, it's a little hard to write this check this month because I was on vacation last week. But if you set it up ahead of time, it can help you with spiritual disciplines. Keep spiritual disciplines consistent. Next one, show people they are loved. Here's my challenge for you. A lot of times we just will scroll on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok or whatever, and we'll just kind of think of it as like we're just mindlessly scrolling just to not think, like we're just going to do it. What if this week, instead of just mindlessly scrolling, you said, God, show me someone that needs to be loved right now. And then your scrolling turns into seeing what's going on in other people's lives. Because here's what I found. I'll scroll, and I'll see that someone's sick. I'll see someone had someone pass away. And I'll be like, oh, that's an opportunity for me to show the love of Christ to them by reaching out to them. So what if we looked at our social media differently, where it was like, maybe this is an opportunity for me to love somebody, to show them that they are loved no matter what, instead of just scrolling? What if we looked at it differently? We're in a day and age now where it's easy to reach out to people. One thing I started doing, a mentor of me told this to me a long time ago. They said, if you're thinking about stuff and a person pops into your head, just text them. Because everyone loves a good text where it's just like, hey, thinking about you today, just wondering how you're doing. That's it. Not because you want anything out of it, not because you have an agenda, just simply be like, hey, want to reach out. And with our technology now, there's no excuse. It's so easy. So maybe if you're thinking about someone that pops in your head, maybe someone you haven't talked to in a long time, just shoot them a text. Hey, I've been thinking about you. I hope everything's going well. Can I pray for you? There's opportunities. We can show people they are loved with the technology. Here's another one. Hold yourself accountable. Hold yourself accountable. Because of the tech that we have, it's easy to have someone check in on you. Our men's accountability group, we were texting. We just moved to Discord now, and we keep each other accountable. We say we're done when we finish reading, and if you don't read, Tim's going to come after you and say, hey, you haven't read in a while, what's going on? He'll check in on you. It's keeping each other accountable. You can have people that keep you accountable with what you look at, with things that you're doing. You can share your health with somebody. Like if you have an Apple Watch, you can share your rings with somebody else. And now they see whether you're working out or whether you haven't. They can see how much you burned today or how much you didn't burn today. They can see that. It keeps you accountable. You can restrict what you see on your phone. For example, my wife, man, I got a lot of things going on my phone. My wife, I asked her with my Safari to put a code there. So I can't go to a private browser. I can't just search wherever I want. She put a code down there. She forgot the code, so I hope I never need that again. But she put a code there, so I can't just go to any website I want on my phone. And the reason why is because I want to make sure I'm okay before I get to that temptation. There's even apps, things like a Covenant app. If you struggle with what you look at online, if you struggle when it comes to pornography, I highly recommend Covenant Eyes. What that will do is you will put it on any device you have, and it takes screenshots of what you see, and it sends it to your accountability partner. And you want to find something that will make you stop? It will take screenshots of what you saw, and if it sees something that it thinks seems a little risky, it will send it to your accountability partner. Whoever that is, you decide who it is. And if you want to delete it, you can. Your accountability partner is going to know you deleted it. That's a struggle you have. Covenant Eyes works. You can hold yourself accountable. And then the last one, invite people to church. Now, I've said this before, and I'll remind you. I truly believe before you start inviting people to a church, I don't ever want to be an organization where it feels like a pyramid scheme. It's like you invite your friends, and your friends will invite their friends, and their friends, and then all of a sudden we'll get big. That's the least of my concerns. Don't invite people to church if you haven't invited them over to your house first, okay? Invest in their lives first. But now, because of technology, it's become so easy to invite people. If a message speaks to you and you want someone else to hear about it, send it to them. It's easy to do. Say, hey, here's the website, here's the podcast, here's the YouTube video. You can just check it out. It spoke to me. I think it might speak to you. It makes it very easy to invite people to church. Because if we look at technology as simply evil, we're not using it as the opportunity and the resources that we have to spread the message of hope that this world needs. Do we need to be careful with it? Of course we do. Just like we need to be careful with everything. But here's what I believe. I believe the message of Jesus is too important, that this world needs that hope that Jesus gives us through the gospel, that it's too important for us to not leverage the technology that is available to us today. That we need to take whatever opportunity we have, whichever way we can, to tell the world that needs the hope about the hope. That's what we need to do. That's why Christianity is still here today. That the technology we have can be used for evil, for sure. But what if we looked at it as this is our opportunity to be a disciple that makes disciples? That this is our opportunity to spread the message of Jesus to the world that needs it. Because they need it. Just like you need it and I need it. So as we close this series, that's my encouragement for you today. To not look at this stuff as like the bad thing that you just are on too much. But say, this is my opportunity to be a disciple that makes disciples through the technology that I have today. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for being a God who is always relevant. And no matter what technology comes out, no matter how much our culture has changed, the message that of you, the hope that you give us, is always needed. So God, I pray that you help us to leverage the culture that we're in today, the technology that we have today, to glorify you, to grow closer to you, and to tell more people about you. God, I pray that you help us to be a disciple that makes disciples, and use whatever we need to use in order to do that. We love you, we praise you. In your Son's name, amen. Let's close this series. Let's close today with this closing song. Let's stand and sing.